All right, we're back with Stephen Green. Stephen Green is the audio video production teacher at College Station High School, and he's here to share with us some ideas on how to capture video for your orchestra concerts so that you can share it with parents, or maybe even go over it in class the next day and have something visual to look at, so you can say, hey, you see our bows aren't lining up here, just using it as a teaching tool. So let's talk about the quick and dirty way to video your orchestra.
The most obvious choice for most people, if you don't have some dedicated video equipment, is to just pull out your phone and use that, which can totally provide you the most basic form of video that you might be looking for. If all you want is one wide shot of your orchestra, just for some review and just to have some kind of documentation, that's the easy way to do it. Obviously, you might want to use the newest phone in the room. Whoever's got the nicest phone in the room that day, they'll probably have the most high quality camera and potentially a good microphone in it too, which we know is probably unlikely, but that is probably the easiest thing to do. And then you can obviously email that to yourself, or upload it to Google Drive, or transfer it to your computer in some way, and then at that point you do whatever you want with that. So the phone is the easiest method because everyone's got one, right? If you want to take a slight step up from there, you can use pretty much any camera that you would normally think of as a photography camera. These days, all the cameras that you would go to the store and buy or buy online are going to have both features, right? You can shoot photos, but you can also record video with it. And it'll have a not great microphone built in, so you'll have the whole experience in some way. And I actually think that photography cameras can be actually a very cheap option to elevate your video quality if that's something that you're worried about. Maybe not so much going to fix all your audio problems, but the visuals will certainly be improved on a real camera, as we might call it. So most people have some kind of DSLR camera these days, maybe a mirrorless, that's kind of the new trend. But anything with an interchangeable lens is what I would recommend to anybody that's looking for a camera. So here at the school, we've got Canon gear. And so something like Rebel T8i, or, the mirrorless is like the M50 or something like that these days. You can buy those cameras as a body-only purchase and buy it without a lens. Most of the time, the lens that comes on these cameras is, it's got some zoom to it, and sometimes they'll even give you 2 zoom lenses if you pay an extra $200 or something. But those lenses that come with the cameras are maybe not so well suited for filming in a dark auditorium, or filming something that's on a stage with just a spotlight lighting it or something like that. So for a orchestra, or something that's probably going to be in a dark auditorium scenario most of the time, what I would recommend you do if you're buying a camera is to buy it as a body only and invest in a lens with a large aperture, is what we're going to call that. So most of the time, that's the most cost-effective way to do it is to buy a prime lens. A lot of people online will talk about the nifty 50 option from most camera manufacturers, and that kind of lens will not zoom in and out, but that's not a problem because you can walk and you can move your tripod up and forward and backwards if you want to change what you're seeing, because you're probably not going to be doing much zooming during an orchestra performance anyway. The nice advantage, other than that, of course, would be that they have a large aperture, which means they can see in the dark a little better. They can open up almost like the pupil of your eye, getting bigger in the dark, and they can let more light in. So you can see a little bit nicer without having to crank up that gain and get a noisy, speckly image. Kind of like when your microphone has to crank the gain and you hear all that hiss. We have the same problem with cameras and visual grain as well. So the prime lens option is usually cheaper. It will let you see in the dark a little better without the noisiness. And you may not have that zoom, but you probably don't need it anyway. So I would highly recommend that as a next step past a phone for most people.
Okay. And that's as opposed to like a camcorder or a GoPro or something along those lines.
Right, absolutely. I think GoPros are really attractive to a lot of people because they're not going to break the bank, and also they're kind of cool, and I can do anything I want with a GoPro. But most of the time, I think that a GoPro is not going to be able to match the quality of a camera with a real lens on it. And if you're going to go the camcorder route, which I think a lot of people probably already have camcorders because they seem like a great all-in-one option. You don't have to think about lenses at all because you can't swap a lens on those. They just don't have the quality either of a traditional photography camera. And like we said, most every photography camera will shoot video these days. If you could find me one that didn't shoot video, I'd be very surprised. And you can put a really great lens on it. And lenses are really the thing that will affect your quality on a camera like that almost more than anything else. So investing in a good cheap prime is probably a much more worthwhile use of your money than getting something like a GoPro or a camcorder.
Let's just say that you got a very generous donor, or you got a bunch of money left over in the budget, and you're like, hey, I want to go buy that fancy cinematic camera that, you know, does have the interchangeable lens options and that kind of thing. And it has some XLR inputs. Why would an orchestra director maybe want to stay away from that and stay on a DSLR or mirrorless?
Sure. The obvious choice, if you have a lot of money, would be like, let's go buy like a really expensive, nice camera. And that could be great, or it could be a disaster, depending on, you know, if you already know how to use a tool such as that or not. So a lot of the nicer high-end cameras do have a ton of great features. And if you're looking at their website or the spec page and it's just like, wow, I could use all these great things. It's one of those things where if you were to get one of those in your hands and look at all the massive, you know, array of buttons and knobs, and it's like, oh, I actually don't know what I'm doing at all with this. That might actually be a bigger problem than just going with a really simple photo camera. And you may not be making as high quality of footage with a big crazy camera if you don't know how to use it right. So it probably is best to go with whatever tool that you know how to use, or maybe kind of take baby steps towards a bigger camera. It's nice to have the built-in XLR ports. That's probably the biggest, you know, feature that's probably really appealing to an orchestra, someone that's going to film an orchestra. But if you're not aware of how to use all those crazy features and stuff, you might be doing more harm than good. So sticking with the basics and then learning how to use them really well is probably a better method.
Yeah, and maybe if you have a need for that, like there are some competitions where you have to have like a one camera solution. You can't do your audio separately.
Right.
Maybe just talk to your school's AVP team and see if you can get somebody to help film. I know that you offer some incentives to your students filming credit for them to come out and do something like that. Maybe they could borrow one of the school's cinematic cameras and do something rather than you trying to do it and then having it look awful and sound awful.
Absolutely. If you've got, my program, I always try to make my kids get extra practice outside of school hours so they can totally get class credit for filming an orchestra concert. And if they wanted to get really elaborate with the equipment they were using, they could totally do that. And they've had at least a little bit of training on that equipment. If you just are an orchestra teacher who just randomly invested in some stuff and you don't know how to use it yet, it may not be worth the stress of let's try to figure this equipment out on the same day we're performing. And it's a lot of balls in the air to juggle at the same time if you're trying to figure out your tool and do the, wrangle all the orchestra and conduct and all the things at the same time. So getting some outside help isn't a bad idea.
It's not like you could have a second chance concert and recapture lost footage or something like that.
Right.
And so if you miss the shot or something, then if somebody bumps the tripod and now you're shooting the side of the auditorium, well, that's just unfortunate.
Yep, it happens.
It does.
And that's why, having multiple cameras might be a good option as kind of a backup. So that leads into kind of like, all right, we did the quick and dirty is use your phone to get your one angle. And if you wanted to step up your video quality, you might go to something like a DSLR or a mirrorless photography camera. Shooting with multiple camera angles and kind of taking your production to a higher level overall, that's kind of another conversation you can have. But if you have multiple cameras recording, it at least provides you a backup, even if you're not going to go through the trouble of editing all of that footage.
You talked about lenses already and the importance of having a good lens. What are the other accessories that you don't want to skip out on? Because again, like you're buying a new camera and you're like, hey, it comes with a kit. What are some accessories where you won't compromise on?
Sure. If you're looking at cameras on Amazon, especially, there are almost like an overwhelming number of kits or combo packs that they'll sell on Amazon. A lot of the time, in my experience, most of the stuff they're going to try to send you all together bundled with that camera is kind of a bunch of cheap junk. So it may be worth buying your camera if it comes with something like a camera bag and a memory card, an extra battery, those things make a lot of sense because having an extra charger or battery on hand is almost invaluable. If your battery runs out halfway through your concert, you don't really have time to sit and charge your battery before you start again. So having another battery to swap out would be really great. Maybe have a couple extras. But I would never cheap out on a tripod, especially if you invested any, good amount of money on a camera. Because what we don't want is for our camera to fall over on a cheap tripod, right? A cheap tripod from Walmart costs you $15, and that might be great for, if you're going to put like a phone holder or something that's not a really nice camera on top, that might be good. But I really like getting a really sturdy set of sticks under my camera, a tripod that is not easily knocked over, maybe even some sandbags. Because if you are recording your concert and there's a crowd in the auditorium, you might have little Timmy running around the back row and accidentally bumps your camera, and that whole thing could fall over, or it could just turn your camera to where we're no longer recording the performers anymore. It's just kind of the empty wall. Or maybe we're seeing little Timmy and his mom sitting next to the camera for the rest of the show. We don't know. But a nice tripod that is sturdy, that you can lock down, and maybe some sandbags, I think is invaluable. Extra batteries, extra memory cards. And when you talk about memory cards, I don't think you should really cheap out on those either, especially if you're going to try to record for your long 30-minute to an hour-long concert, because if you're going to transfer that stuff to the computer, the faster your memory card is, the less time you're wasting waiting on your file transfers and things like that. If you're going to edit any of your footage, then you especially would want your faster cards as well. It's just, if you're waiting on your technology, you're wasting your time.
Your time is worth something too, right?
Absolutely.
And it's like, I'm paying double for this memory card, but if you want to sit there for an hour and wait for your stuff to transfer for every concert, by the way, not just for one concert. It's like, well, I could have just gone and played a wedding,
right,
and I could have made $200 or something like that. And in this case, like, my time's worth way more than that. I want to talk a little bit about 4K. So is 4K overrated? Should we be shooting in 4K? Is all 4K the same? What are your thoughts?
4K is a really nice marketing tactic right now. And 4K has been around for, over a decade. But the fact that not everybody has a 4K TV, not everybody has a 4K computer monitor, nobody's phone is showing a 4K image, it's really unlikely that you're going to benefit from filming and editing and doing everything in 4K in these days. So yes, it sounds very appealing and attractive. Oh, well, my video quality will be so much higher and there'll be so much more detail, and that's probably true. But is anybody going to be able to see it in that high 4K quality when they watch it? Probably not, or at least very few people. Not your whole audience for sure. But also, it's going to bloat the size of all your files. It's going to change your entire kind of chain of work with that video file. So it's going to be a much larger video file, which means you have to have a larger memory card. File sizes and the time it takes to transfer and all the time you might be waiting on your technology is going to kind of become a factor. I was very surprised a year ago, I guess, 2021. My students and I have a film festival every year. And last year we went to, we had it hosted at a local movie theater. And so I asked the movie theater, I was like, well, is it worth us filming our projects for this in 4K? Should I export everything upscaled to 4K? And they told me that even in movie theaters today, in 2021, we are not projecting anything in 4K. And you go to a movie theater and it looks amazing because it's on this giant screen. It looks all crisp and nice. And apparently that's still not even 4K in most places. So it probably, for most orchestra performances, is not worth your time to shoot in 4K.
Fantastic. Good tips. In the next video, we're going to talk about software. If you're going to do any kind of post-production or add titles, or if you're doing multi-camera, obviously you're going to need to have some kind of a software package. If you're recording your audio separate from your video, you're going to need to marry those. And Mr. Green's going to give us some tips on software and how to do that without driving us absolutely crazy. So we'll see you in the next video.